yeah, I think let's dive in. Do you want to go by
Sounds
SAP
good.
or do you want to go by Callan?
I'm impartial. I mean, quite well known as SAP in the community, but Callan's my real name.
Yeah. My name's Juan, in case you wanted to know. Juan. Last name's Gramajo, so everyone thinks it's like some cool brand or something, and I'm like, it's just my last name. I've had a Twitter account for, I don't even know, like 13, 14 years now. Same with like Instagram and everything else, like Reddit. So it's hard for me to like flip it when I got really into like NFTs back in 2021 to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go pseudonym now. Like I was like, nah, it's too late. Like I've done too much. So
Yeah,
I just did my last name. I was like,
yeah, I had like an alt career. That makes sense. I had a completely different career life, and then I started as SAP, and then doxed as SAP, and the two merged. So it just
that's
took a bit of
hilarious.
time.
What were you doing before?
Yeah. I was running my own company as kind of crypto data analysis and financial reporting services, and just consulting in the space and working in a few different startups and projects. And Threshold started around 2022 for me. I got more heavily involved, but there were the precursor projects to Threshold as well that I was also part of in the community stages as NewCypher and Keep, and they merged together to become Threshold eventually. So a long story, complex history, but here we are now.
Yeah, no, one we're gonna definitely jump into as well. So yeah, we kind of already did a little bit. So you were kind of like working as like chain analysis kind of before
Yeah,
diving
I mean,
in.
it was more on like the financial reporting side of things. So like private individuals, traders, and companies that were trading in crypto, deploying, DeFi V1, and trying to unpack like what the heck all of the data was doing on chain, and putting that into some kind of financial report for the entity. And from that, you see all of the different behaviors on chain, and all these products come to life, and what the data actually looks like. So it's pretty good to get that education from the inside out as well as deploying and losing money. Another great way to learn.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, there was a funny thread going around about like any like hacks or rugs that people have been impacted in, and some people's lists were pretty long. And I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of learning you could do in that way. That's actually kind of how I learned too, certain DeFi things. So like, I was really afraid of like liquidity pool providing for a while. It just was like a crazy foreign concept to me, which maybe for you, since you're more technical, you're probably like, it's not that bad. But for me, for a while, I was like, man, like that just sounds like a black hole. And finally, I was like, screw it. Got like $200. I'm just gonna like learn by fire, and yeah, you learn a lot that way for sure. You learned the lessons of impermanent
Definitely.
loss.
Like, wow. Exactly. I was going to say, like, wow, this yield looks great, and then you go to withdraw, and you're like, where did all my principal go? But yeah, learning that the hard way for sure.
Let's see. So when did you get into the Web3 space? Like around like timing wise. So I'm trying to figure out like, yeah, when did you jump into Web3 or crypto?
First, in 2017, I was actually studying at the time. I was studying electrical engineering and computer science, and some friend of mine, I think, tried to get me into a crypto. What are they called? Multi-level marketing, MLM. And I was like, oh, actually, we were out to a coffee or something, and I went to the bathroom and Googled the project, and first thing is a scam, and I won't name it because let's just let it die. Yeah. But it reminded me of Bitcoin because I'd heard about it. I mean, I was at school when I first heard about it, still like high school, and it piqued my curiosity, and I looked into it and saw Ethereum and did some reading. I think it was the Don Tapscott book, like I can't remember exactly what it was called, but blockchain economy or something like this, and got really inspired by like the expanded view of blockchains that book kind of covered, like DAOs and this new kind of ecosystem emerging. And just kind of fell in love with the idea and dropped out of university and kind of scrapped my way into a company that I was forming, mostly around education and just giving some workshops and seminars and things around the idea and helping people to allocate. But that developed into the analytics and financial reporting company after the needs that I heard from the client base that we developed. And yeah, kind of stuck with it from there. So some pretty bumpy rides early 2017 into 2018, and then quite an extended bear period. So yeah, lots of formative years.
Yeah, lots of learning. Those were good years for learning for sure. I think for myself even, I think 2017, is that when Bitcoin, is that when it ripped to 21K from like the low hundreds, right? 2017,
yeah,
2018.
21K.
I always lose track. I mostly remember the sequence of events. Like I just remember buying in the hundreds and then it just ripping to 20, and I was like, what in the Lord is going on? And like that was the first time I considered ever selling. So that's kind of how I remember it. But yeah, I think that is around 2017. Awesome.
No, you got the timing right for sure.
Yeah,
ICO
okay.
season.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, my head is a little foggy on the exact dates. Mostly because I didn't really participate in the ICO stuff. I was like a true Bitcoin maxi, where even Ethereum to me was a shitcoin for a very long time. It wasn't until till 2020 where my opinion changed of Ethereum a lot, and now I'm actually like, I would say probably heavier on the Ethereum side than on the Bitcoin side. So it's been quite a transformation, which there's a question about that later on that we could get into, but you alluded a little bit to it. So you formed this company, and then there was 2 projects that led to the creation of Threshold, I guess, or like the idea, and then it merged. And I believe it was NewCypher, and what was the other one?
Keep protocol.
Keep, yeah. So did you already envision or have the idea of something like Threshold or TBTC? Like, did you want something like that, like a more decentralized Bitcoin solution versus kind of what was existing then, which, if I recall, I think I used Ren, BTC, WBTC. Yeah, I think those were the 2 that I had used back then. Was that already kind of like formed in your head, or was it like these 2 projects was like that's what led you to kind of start laying the foundation down for Threshold Labs?
Yeah, well, I can't claim credit for the early implementations of TBTC V1 or V2 for that matter, but what we're doing with now, kind of, we call it V3 and Threshold Labs, maybe some small amount of credit for the vision there. But in those early stages, there were those 2 projects, Keep and NewCypher, and they actually did quite different things, but they both relied on threshold encryption as kind of part of the integral architecture. So they had the idea of merging their 2 networks, saving on the network cost, deploying both apps on the same network. And Keep was the one that actually had the concept of TBTC V1 and V2. And they started with more of a general purpose technology, as like, how can you lock assets and then dispose of those assets or access those assets using threshold encryption. And to kind of pilot that case, they used this TBTC V1 test case. And that came out, actually, not sure on the exact timelines, but it was certainly in the market at the same time as Ren. And Ren and TBTC, they were pretty much the only other alternatives to WBTC at the time. And WBTC, they weren't trying to do any particular decentralized version of it, certainly. They were just going for maximum centralization and efficiency, and it served the market really well. Like, we wouldn't be where we are today in terms of Bitcoin liquidity if WBTC hadn't served that interest of LPs. And we saw how Ren BTC kind of fell out, and TBTC V1, it didn't have a security issue, but it had a kind of architectural issue that kind of limited the capacity for TBTC minting. It kind of required ETH as collateral as well as TBTC in order to do the mint. and that reduced the capital efficiency of the whole system and ultimately kind of put a cap on its growth. So then TBTC v2 comes out, which just uses BTC collateral, doesn't have an additional requirement, and that capital efficiency has helped us to unlock to the capacity that we are today. And we were exploring some pretty interesting new models that we call TBTC v3, but I don't think we've officially coined it that, but just for understanding the timeline.
Got it. So what was your role then? Like, were you just like a participant? Like, did you just like stumble upon this and then you're like, hey, this is a really cool concept, I want to like get involved, and then you just kept going further and further and further into it? Or yeah, I guess kind of what was your role like around this time frame?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually think I've got quite an interesting story when it comes to my relationship with Threshold. And independently, I was a part of Keep community and NewCypher community before Threshold. And coincidentally, I'm not even sure what the overlap was or how that relationship was formed between the two orgs. But however, so independently, I was involved in the communities. They had their kind of like bootstrapping campaigns, community incentive campaigns, and things like that I participated in. And as Threshold kind of came to be, like I joined the Threshold DAO, I would say in 2022, later 2022. And that was about a year. I think Threshold DAO formed in 2021, and 2022 was really kind of just taking a lot of shape. And I joined one of the committees that had the Treasury Guild at the time. And that was the liquidity incentive program, the growth and financial arm of the DAO, effectively. And I joined that committee, and at that time, the liquidity incentive program basically just comprised itself of T token incentives and T pools. So TBTC v2 hadn't launched yet. And I was involved at that time, and I really enjoyed the community and what the vision was and what everybody was building. And then TBTC v2 came out in January of 2023. And I had just taken over the liquidity incentive program for the T tokens. And we went from 2 pools to something like 20 pools in the space of 2 months or something like that. And instrumental to the incentive program, it's basically a growth function as well. It's like how are we allocating our incentives? Where do we want to grow? What do these go-to-market relationships look like with these DeFi protocols that we're trying to launch with? And what are the milestones that help us to unlock the deeper integrations in DeFi, like your Aave integrations and your Chainlink Oracle and these pieces? So that role kind of suddenly expanded, and I was spending a lot more time on the Threshold project. And I wrote myself a job description for basically growth lead for the DAO and posted that on the forum, and the DAO voted it in. And then I began working on Threshold as the growth lead, and was able to travel around and go to some conferences, represent the DAO, and kind of get that all started. And then 2024 came along. I was working for a Bitcoin startup called Acre.fi, or Acre.fi, and it was initially incubated by the parent organization of Keep as well. So too many names floating around here, but it was still built on top of TBTC. But I was still involved with the Threshold DAO and was focused more on this other startup at the time. And during 2024, the parent organization Thesis, they started to focus on a new chain called Meso, and hopefully the last additional name I'll add to the conversation. But Thesis originally created Keep, they incubated TBTC, they incubated Acre, and then they focused on Meso. And during that time, TBTC basically went unsupported. It was in the hands of the DAO, and the DAO, while it's great for managing a kind of stable protocol, we're actually in a growth phase. And we needed to grow. We needed more proactivity, and DAOs can struggle at that, I think. So saw the necessity for kind of an action-oriented and execution arm for the DAO. And I'd had this idea, some of the community members had been discussing it earlier in 2024. And we tried to put it together in some form, and eventually the timing was right, and 2025 posted on the forum again and said, hey, we need to do this execution arm. This is the budget. This is what we want to focus on. This is, the structure. And we've started to enter into this broad kind of upgrade to the network, not only operationally, but technically as well. And we're calling that Threshold Labs. And it's basically acting as the labs entity for Threshold, which it never really had in that sense. And now we have a team of about 16 people focused on growth and development for protocol, and we're basically trying to make TBTC the canonical Bitcoin in DeFi and for the Bitcoin economy at large. So yeah, exciting times.
That's a crazy journey. I feel like a journey. I don't know. Like when I think about like DAOs and protocols and like what attracts me to the space in terms of like how you could just go from like someone that was a participant of two communities like that, and serendipitously, coincidental, whatever, like they joined and you just kept going further and further, and then now you're the leader of the labs function of this like protocol, and it's a really cool one. Like I think it's something that we will spend some time actually talking about these other two groups, because I still think like Bitcoin DeFi as a whole is very underexplored. I even brought it up recently to someone that like did they have their own DeFi protocol in Ethereum, and I was like, yeah, like Bitcoin DeFi, like I still think it's underexplored, and they're like, Bitcoin DeFi, that's like, they're like dismissing it, and I was like, dude, there's a lot of money there to like to just say like, no, we don't need that, I was like, even if you don't agree with it, I think you guys, like once I found out about you guys, I was like, okay, if I was going to do Bitcoin DeFi, one, never financial advice, like do your own research, don't do your whole bag. That's always what I've learned. The next thing would be, you got to experiment and support these things, because they're super critical. There's too much store of value in Bitcoin to just be like, we're not going to do that at all, any DeFi in it. So it's really cool to hear that, like, it's really cool to hear you go from where you started to where you are now. That's the dream, man. I would say that's the dream. You're doing it, which is great. Congratulations to you on that. That also explains a little bit of like some of the, because I was going to ask you like how the partnerships, or whatever you want to call them, partnerships, collaborations, like how you got Acre and Mezzo like to use TBTC, and it sounds like you at least like knew about them or worked at one of them at least, so like that definitely helps keep them in mind when they're thinking about their deployments for their vision of what Bitcoin DeFi is. So now they're using Threshold, which is, I think it's very aligned. That's great. So for people not as familiar, so is Threshold Labs similar to like other setups from other protocols, like with their lab function in terms of like Uniswap? There's a bunch of orgs that are doing this like DAO foundation setup and then the lab setup. Is it very similar for you guys?
Yeah, without knowing the details of those other setups, I would say it's very similar in that we have a centralized execution that's responsible for product strategy and growth functions, go-to-market, engineering for the protocol. And then the DAO is the token holder DAO. It has ultimate kind of oversight of the labs entity. It could technically dismiss Threshold Labs as a contractor to the DAO if we were underperforming or whatever it is. So the control still is in the hands of the token holders, but we're the ones that are deciding on the product strategy, are executing the engineering and deployment, and then managing the growth and marketing functions for the DAO. Because we just found that, you have a committee for the marketing, you have a committee for liquidity, and you can just keep building all these committees, but everybody's kind of working part-time, and it doesn't have the kind of laser focus and execution capacity that a centralized entity does. So we spun that up, and I think it makes a lot of sense to have this hybridized model where you have the slowness of the DAO, which is a feature in the case of management, security, and maintenance. And then you have the agility and focus of the labs entity, where we can move quickly, we can process market sentiment, market data very quickly, and then execute that in a product strategy. And I think we've been very successful at that in the short period that we've been running Threshold Labs. And I've seen it kind of grow, and our capacity to process that and adapt has certainly grown. And our product strategy is is something that I feel really excited about. And there's more that we can share later in the year. There's still some announcements to come, but I don't think that we could have done this as a DAO, and especially like build in the open. Like I love that as an ethos, and I believe in that, internally in an organization as well. And in some cases, people execute on that very well in the public sphere. But as well, if you're going to do that with all of your processes, then you can lose some competitive edge and market alpha if you're just putting everything in the open, operating everything in a public channel. So I think the DAO approach is the steady state. There'll always need to be kind of execution, I think, from something that can be more agile. But over time, and hopefully over the next 5-10 years or longer, different functions of the protocol kind of ossify, and then they're the pieces that we're not touching. It's well established and it operates autonomously, or it operates with minimal input from the DAO. And we have this system that doesn't require active maintenance or active management in the way that early stage protocols do now. So I think it's an important combination to have execution and management.
Yeah, no, I think that's a beautiful breakdown of kind of the benefits you get from like having a labs group focused on the protocol. Yeah, it makes sense. I'm a part of a bunch of DAOs. I'm a part of Now's DAO, and it can be hard sometimes to corral the chickens to go all in the same direction, so totally get that one. It's fun for sure, like you said. So it's good. I can see like something like TBTC at this stage where it is right now, and it's in its growth, definitely needing like a more agile group basically to go straight, because things move quick in this space. Sometimes you can't take too long in making decisions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. The community is the best part, I think. Like, you just get to hang, all these great people that are in it for the right reasons, and you build relationships over a long time. Like, we have a really nice community at Threshold, people that have been contributing for a long time. But you do get to the point where you say, okay, if we want to compete, if we want to be the best, then I don't think this is the most optimized model for it. Let's try something new, let's adapt, and let's keep all of the best parts of the DAO at the same time.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I mean, kind of speaking a little bit on that, where you were saying like the DAO brings levels of decentralization, stability. I know that you guys operate currently right now. It's actually, for folks not aware, the name Threshold comes from kind of the setup that you guys have, right? The 5100 Multi-Sig is kind of what you guys are operating, and then you have to reach threshold, hence the name of 51 over 100, to do kind of any significant action. Do you see are there any issues with that model right now? Like, in terms of, have you learned anything about having that wide of a multi-sig, I guess, to be able to take action?
Yeah, I mean, in part, we're constrained by the capabilities that the Bitcoin network in itself has. So that multi-sig is a Bitcoin native multi-sig, and the 51 of 100 seats, they get randomly selected from operators in our node network, and they get assigned, and then those node operators are the ones performing, or they're composing the threshold signatures together in order to execute either a mint transaction or a withdrawal on the Bitcoin chain. And we have an architecture that has this kind of forward security model, and the wallets that are custodying the Bitcoin continually rotate. So we have forward security in terms of those participants on the seats. But certainly in terms of the technical details there, when the first iteration of TBTC v2 went live with the 51 of 100 multi-sig, it was using an older signing schema that was common on the Bitcoin network at the time, or was the only option. It was ECDSA. And that, for its own kind of technical reasons and efficiency reasons, could only support basically a 51 of 100 multi-sig. these days, actually, since the Taproot upgrade on Bitcoin, there's a new signing schema called Schnorr, and it's much more efficient in terms of the signing process, and you can create much higher multi-sig. So rather than having like a 51 of 100 multi-sig and that being the downside, we actually want to go in the opposite direction and increase the number of seats. But if it was not an automated process via the nodes and we had to rally that many signers for whatever reason, just to like draw on the kind of DAO execution experience where, some time sensitive thing and you're pinging people and like I'm at work, I can't get to my signing. It's not like that. It's all automated, luckily, and it would be great to increase not only the efficiency of signing but also the number of seats on that multi-sig. It is something that we're looking at, but at the same time, like what we have created with TBTC v2 is basically the best in market in terms of trust minimization that you can achieve for a Bitcoin wrapper at this stage. And that's coming from this like optimistic signing model that we've implemented. But there are these new developments that are looking at things like BitVM 2 or BitVM 3 or these different implementations of BitVM, which is basically a way for signatures to get validated on Bitcoin natively, effectively. And what we have right now is an honest majority trust assumption with threshold. We need the majority of our nodes to be operating with positive intentions in order to have security. But with BitVM and these on-chain validations of proofs on Bitcoin, you can reduce the trust assumption to a 1 of n. So you only need one node in the network of n nodes to be operating with integrity, and you'll always have security or redeemability of the Bitcoin, the underlying Bitcoin. So that's the theoretical best trust model that you can achieve. And there are a bunch of people trying to implement that right now. So it's something that we're following quite closely. And rather than re-implementing TBTC v2 using the new signing schema, it's likely that we'd just jump straight to a BitVM style model. And that would reduce the trust assumptions and improve the efficiency in the same way. And while we see these competing, in a sense, protocols out there that everybody wants to do a Bitcoin bridge to their L2 or to an L1, I think that Threshold positions itself more as kind of like a ubiquitous liquidity layer between all of those destinations. And I don't really see the utility in every chain having its own BTC asset, because you have liquidity fragmentation, you'll have greater slippage, you'll have less efficient markets. And so we need something that can bridge it all effectively. And Threshold's perfectly positioned to do that because we're chain agnostic and we're interested in the same kind of problem solving as these guys are. So hopefully as the space develops, I really hope that all of these Bitcoin L2s continue to grow and build their use cases. But they do need to differentiate. I think that's something that they're struggling with at the moment. But should they achieve their goals and create, volume and liquidity on their chain, then Threshold will be there to ensure that interoperates with the rest of the Bitcoin economy.
Yeah, man, you like read my mind and going ahead regarding like the Taproot update versus going straight to BitVM. Yeah, it's actually kind of funny for like the people not in like in the Bitcoin space. I think most of the people that follow me now, listen to me, are mostly Ethereum, which is kind of funny. Taproot came out, I believe, 2023, and it's funny because like Blue Wallet just announced like Taproot support yesterday, and Blue Wallet's like an OG wallet. They've been around, they're pretty well supported, so it just kind of cracked me up to be like, I think on the Ethereum side we're a little spoiled sometimes with how fast some of these updates can happen and how quickly providers may start accepting or deploying these enhancements or changes. On the Bitcoin side, it could take some time, including for like the older wallets like Blue Wallet. No offense to Blue Wallet, I like them, but yeah, it's kind of funny that Taproot just came out yesterday, so I don't blame you in terms of like not jumping into it immediately and being like, that's the next update, we got to do that now, because like you said, like it's a dynamic space, it's changing. and the BitVM thing, like I'm not super technical, but I feel like that sounds, if it's a more, if it can increase, not that you really like, I feel like 51 out of 100 multi-sig where people are randomly are selected. So it's not like there's any collusion that could really happen because it's not like the same 51 every single time. It's already a pretty good model, you know, like it'd be pretty tough to tackle that. Like it, and I say that without saying names, I say that like in comparison to like what exists out there right now, which is like 2 centralized issuers of the other solutions of Bitcoin. So to me, I'm like, this is already good enough, you know? I don't think you need to speed run into, you know, Taproot support or something like that. Or, you know, if BitVM happens to be the really good one, then, you know, that makes sense. Let's see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've got to be pragmatic as well. Like, there's the ideal tech stack, and as you say, I think that what we have is obviously really good. And I say obviously because it's securing, you know, around over 600. I mean, where the price is at today, but 600 million in Bitcoin assets. And if it wasn't good enough, then that would be a big issue. But it is operating in the wild. It's been doing so for many years, and it's kind of, you know, proving this like Lindy stableness. As you continually don't have a security incident, then the likelihood diminishes in theory, even though we're sitting in the wake of the balancer hack and the aftershock of that. But nevertheless, everything that is operating is in the public domain and available for scrutiny, and hopefully, you know, nobody tries too hard, or, you know, if they will, if they could. But it's out in the open. But, you know, in a business sense, we have to be pragmatic. Is obviously we could invest time and energy in building the Schnorr integration now, because BitVM still is not a solved science. But if we were to do that, then we're reallocating engineering resources from something we could be focusing on for a growth function, or this protocol upgrade that unlocks basically a new demographic of LPs that we can talk to. And these kind of things that, you know, we need to be competitive. There's like the best case tech scenario, and obviously the tech is secure and something that we don't see an issue with. Otherwise we would spend time there. But now we're in this phase where it's like, how can we capture Bitcoin TVL, create more use cases, more utility, more yield opportunities? And that's a big priority for Threshold Labs.
Yeah, no, that's epic. Yeah, we're gonna jump into that a little bit right now. Like, for context, for people that are maybe not super deep into the DAO space, or just for understanding of where this question is coming from. So, Aave recently, which is a huge DeFi protocol, they basically have been doing an analysis of all the chains they support, and they basically determined that there's like a good handful, I want to say like more than 5 L2s that they support now, and the amount of like activity and volume happening in there, and Aave is huge. Like, they have a lot of money. There's just not enough there, you know, to like continue supporting these L2s. And like, I think you said you only have like 16 people at Threshold Labs. You know, so it's very easy for like a consumer to be like, like, why aren't you guys in Stacks? Why aren't you guys in Citria whenever it comes out? You know, like, it's very easy to be like, pick shiny new L2 or new shiny thing and be like, why aren't you guys in there? You know, there's only so many like limited, like liquidity fragmentation is like a really big issue. How do you guys manage that? I guess, is it, because like on the Aave side, the DAO, I believe, it goes up for a vote and then it gets implemented. Is it a similar setup for Threshold too? Like, would it go up for a vote for like a new chain and then you guys go and implement it? Or is it you guys are looking at it proactively saying like, we think this is a good opportunity here, we should strike, and then you may or may not need the DAO vote? Yeah, can you explain that to me, kind of how that would go about? happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of new chain deployments, it hasn't been a DAO process. And these days, that decision process is made internally at Threshold Labs. It takes a bit of engineering to deploy canonical token on a new chain, just something that Threshold chose as a design decision early on, was to deploy canonical tokens, which meant that it's a standard that we basically created ourselves and are deploying that same standard on all of the new destination chains, as opposed to something like Wormhole NTT, for example, like you go NTT out of the box and then your assets everywhere, but it's the NTT standard, which is not necessarily a bad thing in and of itself, but it does mean that some design features of that token are less likely to be implemented in the way that you're needing them, perhaps. And there's some features of TBTC as a token that had some custom features. So we had this canonical token standard take some time to deploy. And as you say, like there's all of these new L2s, these new L1s emerging. They have a lot of hype around them. They have an incentive program and these things. And we've deployed on some of these chains this year, which has been great project. And we're working with the Sui ecosystem and Starknet, and Mezzo went live this year as well. And I'm not forgetting any off the top of my head, but these are kind of early stage ecosystems, right? And we're trying to position for larger institutional market. We want all of this activity that's been happening in the DAT space and these companies onboarding Bitcoin as treasuries and things. And we see this institutional space reaching maturity, or at least now it currently exists, where it didn't really before in that way. So how can we serve the liquidity needs and the product needs for these entities? And in this current market, I think they're the ones that are most interesting strategically. So if we go and deploy new chains, again, we're allocating resources, and I want all of these new chains to succeed in their own right. I think like the more growth, the more interoperability, the more unique business cases and niche strategies, the better for crypto generally. We create more activity, more volume, more fees. But for TBTC, we're trying to focus on a particular strategy and execute that cleanly. So we've deprioritized new chain deployments, and it can be a bit of a mess sometimes. And you kind of see behind these liquidity deals and the bootstrapping, and yeah, it's a competitive space, and sometimes you're just chasing vanity metrics in that, okay, now we have the TVL, but what's that actually doing for our bottom line? And TVL is one metric, but revenue, protocol revenue, I think is something that more people should be paying attention to. And that's what we're focusing on at Threshold. New chain deployments, they might boost our TVL. We could have point schemes, we could have token emissions, all these things with these new protocols. And it's good for exposure and network effects and these things. But right now we're focused on some of our core kind of business opportunities for Threshold. And most of that is centered around Ethereum mainnet and these other established ecosystems in terms of the scale that we really need in order to reach the revenue that we're aiming for.
Yeah. I know I saw a cool post like with an image about like the minting, and it was like hard to describe. I'll have to link it to people so they can see it after. It'll be in the show notes. So basically it was like you could see the big blocks that were coming into TBTC, but then like the tail end of that chart, it was more like what you expect, which is more smaller individual like people minting onto TBTC, throwing myself in there, which is really cool because you could see it like going up like incrementally versus like these big, candles going up, which I'm sure the big candles is super exciting, because that probably means it's either a whale or a institution or something. So I'm sure those are exciting. But I from like a ideals and ethos perspective, like what got me excited was kind of the smaller incremental increase, because it's showing me that there's like more smaller participants that are seeing the value in it in TBTC and what you guys are all working on to make Threshold successful, like you said.
Mhm. Yeah, we like to think that, we're for the people in that we're community owned and operated protocol. TBTC and the T token, we're pretty old. Like, as far as the space goes, the T token's fully diluted. It's in the market. There isn't, this points program or this large VC backing with a bag that's ready to drop on the market. And so I think over time, like, having a fully liquid token is quite an advantage in the sense that people can access it, people can join, people can participate. And I think having like a community owned protocol and also being Bitcoin Rails, people can align themselves to the vision generally. And yeah, it's awesome to hear that you've recently started using the protocol, or perhaps earlier as well. But to see those graphs and see that, yes, there are people out there using the protocol as opposed to just big whales or just these private deals, I think it's a nice vibe, honestly. And I think we have a great community at Threshold, and definitely I felt encouraged throughout the process I was describing earlier to continue to get involved. And that speaks to this open nature of DAOs and composable crypto. Like, you can come and make of the opportunity what you will, and you're measured by your capacity and your outputs, as opposed to, a resume or something more formal. And coming up from that path personally, I didn't submit a resume on the forum. It was an anonymous account at the time, like, known through the community, through my actions and through my presence in calls and whatnot. But it's just a different approach, and that's something that I really like about crypto generally. It's an open and inclusive system. And I think, things are changing to some extent. Like, crypto is formalizing, and the boundaries between kind of just a fully permissionless world and this kind of regulated environment, they're getting closer together. And I think that's beneficial from a liquidity perspective. But I just hope that, we don't end up in the same kind of gated environment that we're in now, just with better infrastructure beneath it. And that's why I think DAOs are a really important part of crypto going forward, is because they hold that ethos, and organizational structure is fully on chain. So I hope it stays that way.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I've been really resonating with the making crypto cypherpunk again. I feel like we started off that way, and then we wanted the validation and the acceptance of the traditional finance space for so long that we kind of compromised on a couple of things to get that validation and that approval. And now we have it. It's great. I'm happy for it. Then I'm like, okay, it's time to go back. Like, let's explore more peer-to-peer mesh networks, community ownership, stuff like that. So privacy too. Like, let's go back. My 401k and my bags are happy, but I think I'll sleep better at night knowing DAOs and the original idea that got me here exists.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree.
All right, so since I am in the legal space, I will say anything that you will say here is, like, in this next question is not going to hold you to it. Anyone here also shouldn't take it as financial advice, but let's say, like, looking ahead 5 years from now, where do you see TBTC, its role in the Bitcoin DeFi space, or just in general? And do you see yourself maybe more in line with supporting traditional financial institutions, or more like integrating with more like emerging complex use cases? Like, I saw a really cool one recently that was fun, that I was telling people. I was like, you can go to Mezzo, get like their MUSD, which is like a stable coin, and then you can start trading with that money, hypothetically. Again, don't do this if you don't want to, but you could go do like perp dexing essentially on Bitcoin, which is super cool to me. Yeah, I guess, like, do you see TBTC kind of playing a role and function with both, or skewing one way or another a little bit more?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it'll certainly be a combination of the two. in one sense, we are really positioning to enable institutional capital flows. And that requires different trust assumptions to kind of the system that we have in place now. So we want to make sure that we can meet those requirements, but we'll still operate in this permissionless way at the same time. And just by the nature of TBTC, like, it will be composable. It will be able to be integrated into these other use cases. And we will continue to decentralize and automate the management of the protocol itself. So these BitVM upgrades, these things that at the moment we have a permissioned set of node operators, and that was a requisite requirement in bootstrapping the network and getting V2 live. But the goal ultimately to have a completely permissionless node structure and an efficient signing model and low trust assumptions. Because decentralization, for me, like where I began with decentralization and still am to many degrees, is ideological. And I like the idea of this kind of autonomous system that anybody can participate in, that serves a common good, that everybody can access. But I think in a product sense, decentralization isn't really a feature for people. I mean, different demographics, cypherpunks would probably disagree with that. But trying to speak broadly here from the market, from my observations. And decentralization is more of like a security consideration. Like, it is just going to be more secure. It's going to have more longevity if we don't have centralization within the system. So to minimize our own risk profile, the more we decentralize, I think, the better that risk profile is going to be. So just taking that very pragmatic business approach while still kind of fostering the Cypherpunk ethos more personally. But I think that kind of mechanism is important to ensure longevity in the system, and finding ways to do both at the same time and maintain both. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting how we thread that needle specifically, because part of my issue with TBTC V2 and the learning that we've done so far is that it's harder to compete when we optimize for the Cypherpunk maxi side of things. And it's just true that there is more capital, there's more liquidity in the other side of town. And, it's a compromise and something that perhaps I have mixed feelings about generally, but is also something that this competitive part of me, I want to be, I don't want to just have the most decentralized protocol. I want to have the most useful protocol, and I want to provide the most utility to the world. And if this is what the market's asking for, and this is how we can serve the most people's interest and build the Bitcoin economy and create a place where people can permissionlessly use Bitcoin DeFi, they can borrow MUSD on Mezzo and earn, basis trading or leverage looping or whatever they want to do with that, and not have to go through a centralized institution. And at the same time, I think probably for the next few years, probably quite a few years, the largest retail segment is going to come through some kind of managed platform. And it's not going to be how I envisioned it per se, of everybody like onboarding their keys and wearing a ledger around their neck or whatever it is, and they're going to go with what they know. And there'll be these nice apps that they're familiar with and customer service and all this. So yeah, it's kind of been a bit of a reality check this year, I think, personally, and for the space of like, how do we actually do this at scale? And this is kind of where we're landing with it.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you kind of sharing that, because I think you're right. Like it's kind of funny. Like I look at Zcash, for example, like right now, like it's ripping. It's got everyone's attention, and everyone's like, a lot of people are like, trying to dunk on it, saying like, well, nobody uses it. And I was like, I mean, you could kind of make the same argument about Bitcoin too, a little bit. Like it was supposed to be, peer-to-peer cash or whatever, but I digress on that situation. So it's funny, like now that it's like ripping, everyone's like, hey, let's actually invest on like apps. Let's do this. Like it's bringing the ideas, that innovation and those people to come in and build there, So I feel like for better or worse, I think you're kind of spot on with what we're seeing in the market, which is if people see that there's a ton of liquidity there, they'll figure out creative ways to like you said, go looping, go farming, go do whatever strategies that exist out there. Like I think those will naturally come just by the sheer fact that there's like a ton of liquidity there, So I think you're spot on, that as much as my brain, I'm a consumer, you're obviously like a founder, a co-founder, and you're leading an organization that is doing great stuff, like it's very easy for me to be like, yeah, you should go do the cool, fun, emerging tech stuff. I'm not doing anything. So, but yeah, I think you're spot on, like I think if you bring in those bigger wallets and accounts and let them and convince them that TBTC is actually a better solution for them than the competitors, even if they're not going to do anything crazy, just by the amount that just by the fact that they're signaling by minting your specific version of BTC. I don't say you specifically, just like you, Threshold as a whole. Yeah, I feel like the retail will be like, what the hell is this thing? And they will come, As a side too, just so you know, I minted on Ren and WBTC. Like this is a long time ago. This is like 2019, I want to say. Man, that minting experience was so brutal. And the first time I used your guys' platform, I was like, oh man, gotta get ready for a world of pain right now. Because people forget, like it takes a couple blocks, takes a couple time for the Bitcoin layer to settle, for everything to be safe. People want it, we're used to this, and it's, you mint and it's like, go make a cup of coffee and go eat a croissant or something and come back in 30 minutes because it's going to take some time. But it was great, man. I was just going to say, like, your minting experience it's really good from an end user perspective. I don't know if that's what the institutional finance people are seeing, but like, from a consumer perspective, it's great. Like I felt like the hand holding was the right amount, to trust, to instill trust that what was happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it, is you want to trust what you're doing, and it can be super scary to move your Bitcoin ever. And I appreciate your comments, and I would just say that we're about to launch a completely new front end, and I think you're being very charitable about the current front end, and it's about to get a whole lot better. So stay tuned. That should be dropping very, very soon. In fact, I think if you check our socials, there's a public date, 11/11. So I'm not sure when this will come out, but if it's out before then, stay tuned. And if it's out, go check out the new front end.
We'll send people to the new UI. I thought it was great. I mean, I don't know. I laugh because like I made this joke before in the past where like I feel like we've gotten softer. Like my first wallet that I ever used was Mycelium, which I don't even think exists anymore. It was like an old school Bitcoin wallet. That thing was utilitarian, is probably like even a nice compliment. No offense, Mycelium team. It was great during the time, but yeah, I think people are just pampered, Like I remember having to figure out what PGP keys were and like checking that the commit that they did for an update to the wallets, they would sign off with the PGP key, and I would have to go check to make sure that was the same one that they used in the past, that they say it's them, just to make sure that like the download is like legit. So I like vividly remember all this from early on, and now I'm like, man, you guys got it good, man. iOS apps, App Store, like you guys don't even know.
Exactly. People complaining about crypto user experience having joined, 2021 or later, they really don't know it. And I'm even reminded of this, like, I'm so used to it now. Obviously, like wallet signing experience is not that bad, but I signed most of my transactions from hardware, And as soon as I use a hot wallet, I'm like, wow, this is incredible. Like, what an amazing
Yes.
UX. I just click a button and it happens. Like, so
Yeah.
I don't know what everybody's so caught up on, but no, I do understand that, your mom and pop and maybe the younger generation are not going to have the time and the patience and want to click through things. And yeah, I get it. It's not kind of day-to-day friendly if you want to go pay for a coffee and you have to crack out a hardware wallet and press a bunch of buttons, and yeah, not quite there.
Yeah. I'm a bad use case. I mean, I'm the person that bought coffee with it, and they made me wait on the side while I like clear transactions before I got my coffee, which was like a full 20 minutes. So I am the worst use person when it comes to this.
Did they give you your coffee while you're waiting, or did you have to wait?
They did, like, at some point they were like, okay, this guy's been here for like 10 minutes, let's just give him something, and they just like made me wait. But I was so like excited, because like people forget, like in 2015, like I think it was 2015, to be honest, I don't recall, but like it was, the rallying call was like spend it, so I have a couple, that coffee, like I don't even want to think about how much it is now. Like it's gonna hurt if I think about it. So I just don't. But that was a rallying call, was like, use it, spend it, bit refill, 5 VPNs, like. So that's what I was doing, I was a young person and it was all exciting. So yeah. Anyways, I like your user interface. I'm excited for the new one. I agree with you. Like, now I am a little bit like, yeah, it could get better and stuff like that. Like now I'm like a connoisseur, I guess, of user experiences. But, when I really think about it, it was great. Like, it was just good. It was easy, straightforward. Kind of knew what was going down. All right. Two more. What are your current favorite strategies with TBTC right now? This is, I saw you guys had a really great tweet that have a link about the different networks you're supporting and that support TBTC and all that. But like, it's your time to be like, which one do you like? What are some exciting ones?
Yeah. I mean, I think right now it's kind of hard to say where we're at. Like 1010, this flash crash, there was, to preface that, I'd say, an interesting strategy that some people deploy is using, commonly like TBTC is a great collateral option. We have, I'm not sure precisely off the top of my head, but a large percentage of TBTC is on Aave being used as collateral. And most people will borrow stable coins against that, and that will allow them to go and do some yields or some trading or basis trading or something like that. And so I would say like that's a great strategy if you have the capacity to manage your risk. And there are also these great managed products that you can use as well that are about to go live. So just improving the capacity or the ability for people to deploy into these quite sophisticated strategies in a permissionless way and earn Bitcoin denominated yield. So we're going to start deploying a few of these on our new front end. But then the 1010, and then currently we're kind of going through this Stream, Binance, XUSD, or I can't remember the exact ticker, maybe that's it, blow up, and everybody's looking at the strategy managers and everything that like that right now. So right now, like in this moment, saying that these actively managed strategies are my favorite might be a little bit of a faux pas, but I still think that most people are not going to be able to execute these things by themselves, and they shouldn't try. Well, look, I don't know if I should say no financial advice if I'm telling people not to do something risky and difficult, but maybe it's just legit advice. Like, stick to your wheelhouse if you're new to the space. And if you're old to the space, I think you've learned your lesson by now trying to do it yourself. So these kind of like managed approaches and vaults generally, even though we're in a bit of a down moment for them, I think are an integral part of DeFi moving forward, because they introduce like sophisticated strategies and efficiency into the market, even if it's just like liquidity management on a concentrated liquidity DEX or something like that. People can do it, and you can manually do it, and sometimes, some of my friends say they were manually doing their concentrated liquidity and on some super hyped project and tight range, and they're just printing fees and they're having fun, not caring about impermanent loss or whatever. But generally, like if we want stable liquidity and we want usable depth and these things, then we need to have something that persists and is efficient and can handle scale. And so I think these vaults and strategies that are being managed generally are great efficiency improvements and also yield opportunities for people as well if they choose to allocate to them. They all have different risk profiles. I think it's important that there's transparency into these things, but generally I think it supports the ecosystem and is kind of, structural component to the market that I think is really helpful. So there's that kind of side, which is like maybe a bit riskier and right now a bit sensitive. And then there's kind of like just your risk or lower risk options in the way that I see them, and like kind of staking and these single-sided deposits. And so I put it in quotes because there's no real Bitcoin staking, but you can use your Bitcoin to stake and you can validate networks using Bitcoin and TBTC specifically as well. We have Meso and we have Starknet at the moment, which are two chains that you can deploy TBTC to and support the security of their network and receive emissions and validator rewards as a result. And I think that, both of those chains doing very well. Starknet just launched their staking feature. And I think that's a really interesting use case because, again, for both of those networks, where they're trying to build this Bitcoin economy, if you're validating that with Bitcoin and, they're paying their gas fees on the network with Bitcoin, or I should say like TBTC, then you can earn Bitcoin just by staking single-sided, and it doesn't have the same kind of market risk as allocating to a DeFi strategy or liquidity market. And actually, to really, that's a bit of the landscape. But what I'm most excited about right now is yield basis, and that's Michael Ogorov and some of the team there have just launched this new liquidity protocol, which is probably the most innovative DeFi protocol that I've seen this year. And it's kind of remapped the landscape of liquidity for Threshold specifically. Like we're one of the first Bitcoin assets that went live there. And I'm going to, probably miss some of the detail here, but effectively deposit your TBTC. And because it's Curve ecosystem, it's built on top of Curve. Mm-hmm. There's basically like a credit facility in CRV USD, and you can mint a very tight LTV, 100% LTV Curve USD position against the TBTC that you deposit, and that gets LP'd. And then that LP token is the collateral to the loan. So it's quite tight in terms of the margins there, but has a rebalancing system in place. And effectively what it's trying to do and what I think it's solved is impermanent loss. We were talking about that earlier. And it has this way of kind of drawing down debt or repaying debt against the TBTC position to maintain that kind of delta neutral exposure to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And so you can LP your Bitcoin, you get volatile pair liquidity, like stablecoin liquidity against your Bitcoin, which is really expensive. And it's a single-sided yield source in theory. So in theory, you should maintain the same amount of TBTC that you deposited in, and you should be able to get that out plus your rewards. And still early stages, and I haven't looked at the data recently, but it was performing very well. And it launched maybe like 5 days before the flash crash.
Yeah.
And didn't just self-immolate, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And I think they would have been very happy to see that. But what's super interesting is like we have a $50 million $50 million TBTC cap on yield basis at the moment. And what that instantly did was create $50 million worth of stablecoin liquidity against TBTC. And if we wanted to incentivize that, we'd be paying multi-million dollars per year. If we're trying to pay, like 2 or 3%, which is a really low hurdle rate, and not to mention the impermanent loss and any LP in there would have to hedge naturally, but yield basis does that automatically. So now we have this large stablecoin liquidity pair that kind of came out of nowhere. We don't have to pay for it. People are actually getting paid to LP, and it's just made the whole Bitcoin ecosystem much more efficient. And so I think that's what I'm really excited about. It's a yield source, but also like a great liquidity solution. And I think maybe the market isn't so aware right now of that feature and how uniquely positioned Curve and Yield Basis is to execute on a product like that. Like, you can't just do that on top of Uniswap because you need a liquid credit facility. Maybe Aave could partner or launch their own DEX or something like that, but you have all the liquidity bootstrapping, and it's complex. It's really complex. And I don't know many mathematical minds that could do it in the way that Michael has done it. So yeah, I feel very excited about that project, and it's had great benefit to our liquidity profile. So hopefully that continues.
Yeah, no, it's actually, Curve's like an OG, but I never really I wasn't fully evolved into like the Curve wars or anything like back in the past. So I don't have that context or anything. I heard about it, but I wasn't like in the ecosystem or anything. But when Yield Basis came out, I was like, Curve. This is interesting. And I saw the TBTC connection too, and I was like, interesting. Okay. That's something that I immediately started researching myself. Yeah, it's definitely a really cool thing. Like you said, it survived, which is great. I feel like at this point, even for me, like, I was in a bunch of protocols, like DeFi protocols. It's not even that I don't trust them. I was just like, I don't trust anything right now, guys. Like, the only thing I trust is holding TBTC. So I just brought everything. I just took everything out. I was like taking it out, and I'm just holding it here right now. And again, it's not a knock on those protocols or anything. It's just like the only thing I do trust is this. Everything else, I'll let the market kind of figure itself out, and then I'll go back in, see what strategy I want to pursue. But yeah, the Yield Basis one is definitely the one where I'm like, I'm gonna have to go check that out. I do like the Mezzo one too. That one's pretty fun.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
Mezzo is actually also positioned to do something similar. Like, they're building their own liquidity ecosystem. They have a lending facility. They have a DEX. It's something that they could theoretically deploy as well. So definitely one to pay attention to. And just one small side note is that NewCypher, which was one of the teams that came together to create Threshold. Mm-hmm. It was co-founded by McLean Wilkerson, who's my co-founder at Threshold Labs and OG in the space and in the community at Threshold. And his co-founder of NewCypher was Michael Ogerov. So there's a connection there from way back. I think, they went to the same co-working space or something back before DeFi. So some deep history there.
Yeah, that's some deep history. Thank you. Appreciate that, man. That's awesome. Yeah, I actually listened to that interview with your co-founder, to prepare for this a little bit. Yeah. Okay, so 2 easy ones, and then we can wrap it up. As a previous Bitcoin maxi, do you find it easier to sell the idea of TBTC to an Ethereum person or to a Bitcoin person? It doesn't have to be maxis in either world. Just what is it? Is it easier upsell for an Ethereum person or for a Bitcoin person? What do you think? No bad answers here.
Well, I think, yeah, I'd say much easier for Ethereum people for a number of reasons. I think Ethereum people they have the perspective of the global economy that Ethereum is creating. And then you have the Bitcoiner profile, which doesn't generally or acknowledge the broader ecosystem of crypto and the broader utility. And I think you said earlier, where you started personally is Bitcoin maxi, and even Ethereum at that time was a shitcoin, and something happened along the way. But I think Ethereum community generally, very open-minded, very experimental, and just wanting to invent new mechanisms and solve real-world problems. And I think Bitcoin solves its own problem, but there's a much more extensible use case for Bitcoin that I hope is never native on the Bitcoin protocol, because that would change the fundamental value proposition of Bitcoin personally. And I love that maxis exist, and they're let's not change anything. And there are some things that I think, maybe we could change, we could get opcat as a function, and that would create a lot of extensibility. But at the same time, keeping it neutral and keeping it slow, I think is, you mentioned earlier, even the wallet's taking so long to update. It's I do see that as a feature. Like, let's keep it slow and steady. Let's build that trust continuously. Because frankly, like if there's something were to happen to Bitcoin, then the whole space would fall over. Honestly, in my perspective. But yeah, Ethereum community, very open-minded, very optimistic. So much easier to convince them about the utility of Bitcoin and DeFi.
Yeah, I was over on Nostr trying to get people to come listen to this. A lot of people were like,
brave.
Yeah, I know. I was like, you guys might not like this, but I was like, you should really come listen to this. Yeah, a lot of people.
That's cool.
It was fine. We can't live in echo chambers, so I'm like, hey, if I could be that person that's over there, that's slowly nudging them to be like, hey, there's some cool stuff happening in the world that kind of aligns and relates to you. Come listen, then hey, I'll play that role. Awesome. So, last question. It's a long story, but initially I got started with like bite-sized information. That was kind of the whole gist of what I was doing online with my content. And so with that theme, I continue that, which is I ask people what is their favorite snack.
Favorite snack? Hardest question last.
Don't say carrots and hummus.
Just by volume, I would say no. I'm going to say something a little bit less exciting, even maybe like a protein bar, in all honesty. But before the call, I had a matcha and a brownie, chocolate brownie. So that's pretty good late on a Friday as well. But yeah, just
matcha,
locked in at the desk. A protein bar will keep me going.
What kind of protein bar?
I don't know. I wouldn't really know how to differentiate them, to be honest. Like whey protein, high protein.
Okay.
Trying to be sugar free.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that. I like the matcha and cupcake thing too. So that's good. Or the muffins. So appreciate that. Yeah. Well, thanks again. Where should we send folks? This will come out probably on that 11/11 date, most likely, actually, like day of. But yeah, where should we send folks?
Awesome. Yeah, definitely check out our socials. I'm very active on X, of course. We're at the T Network is our main account. And we also have TBTC_project. So follow those accounts. And if you want to come and chat, the Discord is a great place to hang out and share with the community. We have a bunch of OGs there that will share their perspectives on the space and the market, and always interesting and sometimes humorous and cynical perspectives from the OGs. But yeah, Discord is a great place to get in touch with the team and things like that. And I'm at Cypherpunk on X if anybody wants to reach out.
Yeah, I'll have all those links below. Check out the new user experience. Go mint some TBTC. Be the change you want to see. That's what I'm telling people. Yeah, and thanks again for your time.
Been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.